What's going on YouTube? It's Deej, back again with another video, and hey, it's the weekend. That means it's time for another 2023 NFL mock draft, and this is an exciting one because as much as I love seeing football on the TV, with the Super Bowl come and gone, now all 32 teams and all 32 fan bases are fully diving into off-season, season, and draft season. So if you're new to the channel, really glad to see you here. Glad to have you here. Be sure to subscribe. Lots more draft and off-season coverage coming your way. And also, I want to get a quick thank you out to all of my new subscribers of the last couple of weeks, returning viewers, anybody. Seriously, over the last month and a half, 2 months, I've been posting mock drafts every weekend, and the engagement's been awesome. And seriously, just getting the chance to talk to so many different football fans is something I never thought I'd get the chance to do, and it's been a lot of fun. So continue to do that. Continue to share your thoughts down below about your favorite team and the picks that we get through today's mock draft. Like if you enjoy, and subscribe if you are new. So with all that jazz out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about this first round of my updated 3-round mock. And just in case you are new, today's the first round. Then tomorrow I'll have the second round video, and then Sunday will be the third round portion of this updated mock. So now with all the house cleaning down, we start with the Houston Texans up on the clock at number 1. I did go ahead and make the trade off screen because, again, mock draft database, I love this website specifically because of how you can see previous picks right here, but the pick for pick swaps isn't always 1-to-1, but for today's video I decided to make it a swap at 1 and 2, and then the Texans gave up pick 33 to Chicago, which is kind of awesome if you're a Chicago fan. I think you could get even more. No, I'm not even saying that that's not plausible. You certainly could get more, but for the sake of giving up Chase Claypool for pick 32, getting 33 back in the trade, I think is a pretty awesome return. Certainly could get more in real life, but again, I'm at the discretion of the website. So let's go ahead and kick things off with Houston taking Bryce Young. I still think this is the direction it should be going. I know D'Amico Ryans has been saying some stuff about maybe going defense, and obviously a defensive coordinator, become head coach. Man, that makes sense. I think part of that's just a smokescreen. Just try to maybe lower the asking price from Chicago, maybe to try to get other teams to think they don't need to trade up, and again, by that virtue, lower the asking price. So I think it's a bit of a smokescreen. I still think Bryce Young is the guy that Houston should be taking here at 1. So that's who I'm going to have them taking. And then we get to Chicago. I think Jalen Carter would be the pick at 1, and therefore you get him at 2 and the 33rd overall pick in this mock. That's awesome. That's a win there for Chicago. And whether it's Jalen Carter at 2 or Will Anderson at 2, who will go ahead and come off the board here at 3, I think it's a win. It's an A grade for either team, no matter the outcome. Both teams need help on defense, and I'm really excited for Chicago. We get Jalen Carter here at 2, and again, if you got Will Anderson, that's totally fine. But then tomorrow in the second round portion, I go pretty offensive heavy, and I'm really excited to kind of discuss that in the next video. So if you're a Bears fan, be sure to come back, or if you're just interested to see what I'm gonna do with Chicago, be sure to check out tomorrow's video. All right, now let's talk about the Indianapolis Colts. I'm gonna go Will Levis this time at 4. I've had some mocks with them moving from 4 up to 1 to get Levis. I've discussed Ballard. He likes these toolsy, tradesy quarterbacks, big strong arms, big tall stature, and Will Levis. I'm not saying he's going to be Andrew Luck, because Andrew Luck at his peak was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but he is a guy that could get you what you lost when Andrew Luck retired, right? I know a lot of Colts fans are really high on CJ Stroud, and I've done plenty of mocks with that already, and I'd hate to have people coming back to the channel to see the same video basically over and over and over again. So I'm going to go Levis this time around for Indianapolis. You don't have to trade up. You stick and pick and maybe get their QB1. I'd be fascinated once this draft is done to see what their quarterback rankings are, because I would love to know what Ballard and how big of a say Irsay has, what was his list, all that stuff. And then also the hiring of Shane Steichen. First time I'm getting to talk about it on the channel, and I'm really excited about that hire. This back and forth relationship between the Colts and the Eagles, just hiring members of the other staff, is really interesting. Ballard and Harry Roseman must be best friends. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like it is. So for Shane Steichen coming into a situation, getting a Will Levis, he was there Justin Herbert's rookie year, since he took over as the play caller in Philadelphia about midway through 2 seasons ago now. Took them on, a hot run down the stretch to get the Eagles into the playoffs. And of course, this past year, as the primary OC and play caller, got him to the Super Bowl. So I'm not saying he deserves all the credit. There's certainly a lot of talent on that roster, but a guy who's had a lot of success developing quarterbacks, I'd like to see what he could do with Will Levis. So I like that fit there at 4. Then we get to Seattle. I'm going to go Tyree Wilson. This is an interesting spot because C.J. Stroud is kind of fascinating. I have a lot of Seahawks fans who are interested in quarterback in this year's draft class. And then I have a lot who are like, no, I'm out unless it's C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. So we kind of hit that crossroad here. Stroud or Tyree Wilson. I'm going to go Tyree Wilson. He's the edge this team just doesn't have. I think Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, they have different skill sets, but a little undersized, not great against the run. And when I say undersized, they're obviously bigger than me, right? And not even from a height perspective, but those guys don't play the run at a high level. and they are speed rushers. And then Uchenna Nwosu is kind of this hybrid linebacker, edge rusher. So getting a guy who's 6'6", 280, could kick inside in passing situations like when you're going nickel and dime, I think that's an interesting add to that defense. Furthermore, also a guy who played 5 years of college and got production later and later in his career. So when we talk about Seattle here at 5 and then even Detroit next at 6, these are two teams that, well, Seattle made the playoffs, and then Detroit was the team that was held out of the playoffs because of Seattle winning in that last week of the season. So these are two teams that can win now, but are both having the luxury of picking the top 6. So it's really interesting there. So I think Wilson's someone who can help Seattle win right now. Again, he's that edge and defensive lineman I don't think they have right now on the roster. So I'm intrigued by that fit, even though I think I like him more as a top 10 pick versus a top 5 guy. So then we move on to Detroit. I'm going to hop on the Devon Witherspoon hype train here. I love the idea of getting Jeff Okudah some help. I'm still excited and optimistic to see what Okudah could become because, hey, he went number 3 overall for a reason. And yeah, maybe you say what you will about that draft class and the corner class, whatever, but, Jeff Okudah was a guy who felt like a no-brainer, right? Like, didn't have penalty issues, didn't have, big plays coming up against him. Like, his tape, I mean, you want to say corner's tape's perfect, but his resume coming out of Ohio State, kind of one of those DBU colleges, was as close to perfect as it could get. So I think by adding another guy on the outside, and Witherspoon's a perfect fit for what Aaron Glenn wants to do. A lot of man press, and Witherspoon, this past year at Illinois, also you get to keep him there in kind of the Midwest. He only allowed 1 yard in press coverage last year. I mean, that's the Aaron Glenn fit. So I'm hoping to get, Witherspoon maybe into that CB1 role, make the assignment that much easier for Okudah. And then, he's going into year 4 truly, but playing-wise, year 3, and I'm hoping we're seeing that leap forward next year. So this has been an interesting crossroad. I've been kind of hesitant about corner at 6, but I do think it's the strength of the draft class, so it kind of makes sense to go ahead and try to draft one early. And also, like some of the names I've been putting here, Miles Murphy, Brian Brzee, those guys feel like kind of projects on the defensive line. This is a deep edge class, so if you're going to go D-line, we're not going to necessarily go edge maybe a little bit later on throughout this draft, but nonetheless, I think you can get some defensive line value a little bit later on. Go ahead and get your choice of a cornerback here at 6. I'm starting to come around to that idea. Anyways, let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to go ahead and go offensive tackle. I've been kind of hesitant to do this, but, it's cool to see Mock Draft Database have Paris Johnson Jr. as OT1. I feel like, not to say I'm a genius or anything like that, but I feel like I was a little ahead of that than most, but it starts to feel like it's becoming more and more consensus. But here I'm kind of intrigued by the fact that played right guard 2 years ago at Ohio State, shifts over to play left tackle, which I think is his true position, because he's 6'6", 315. To me, he's a little too big to play guard. Also, the footwork's great. I feel like you're kind of wasting a guy with awesome mirroring ability by playing him on the inside. But considering he has played on the right side, he's comfortable being able, because like flipping from one side of the O-line to the other, I mean, that's like learning how to write with the other hand. But the fact that he's done that before, maybe this is your right tackle for at least the foreseeable future, if not the extended future, paired up as bookend tackles with Colton Miller. That would make Josh McDaniels happy. Obviously coming from New England, offensive line was always a big priority there. It would make Josh Jacobs happy. It would make whoever that new quarterback is very happy. So I think the fit kind of makes a lot of sense. And then maybe even if you keep Jermaine Illuminor, maybe he's a guy who could kick inside. Then you have Dylan Parham play either the other guard spot or center. So I'm intrigued by this fit and how it maybe just rounds out that O-line. And I'm obviously making this selection hesitantly with the assumption that Aaron Rodgers is going to be their quarterback next year. Him or Jimmy Garoppolo. Like one of those two guys. They're not in the quarterback market. But that being said, depending on if Rodgers retires or if he wants to go to the Jets, this could become a very different conversation. This could be obviously a very logical CJ Stroud landing spot. Let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons. I'm actually going to go back to a pick that, man, I really like this fit. I like Brian Branch just about anywhere I can put him because the guy can just flat out play. Great tackler, great in coverage, instinctive, awesome athletic ability. There's not much not to like about Brian Branch. And yeah, this is probably a little bit higher than I think a lot of people have Branch coming off the board. But that being said, I think the fit does make sense, right? You're getting a guy who's a sure tackler, can help in the run where the Falcons need help, can be a big impact player in coverage. And you see the impact Kyle Hamilton made as this, safety nickel corner type. Last year, it felt like once they made that change in that Baltimore defense, they started hitting their stride. So I'd be really interested to see the impact that a Brian Branch could have for Atlanta. Granted, I think there's a lot more holes in that Atlanta defense than where Baltimore was last year. Kind of Hamilton shifting in the right spot on the field was just kind of that last click that they needed to have everything fully come into place. But I don't think it's out of the realm that he goes top 8. He's a guy that I've had fluctuate so much in these mock drafts because of his position. Just like Bijan Robinson, I've had him go as high as 10, and I've had him go as late as the last pick in the first round. It's just hard to tell when you have these positions that aren't, wide receiver, corner, edge, that make all this money, and there's a big edge to be had drafting someone there and getting a rookie contract at corner, wide receiver, edge, quarterback, all that stuff. So it's a little different here with nickel corner, safety hybrid, but I think he's a guy that maybe fan bases are a little hesitant on once he gets drafted, but once he hits the field and he starts making plays for you, he becomes one of your favorite players. So I think that could be the case here for Atlanta, who obviously needs a ton of defensive help. Furthermore, tomorrow's video, we're going to go edge in the second round. So again, with the deep edge class, I think you can wait another round and get just one of the best players in this class in Brian Branch. Let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. This is among the easiest decisions I had putting this together. CJ Stroud, I mean, what do I need to say? Team that needs quarterback, and depending on who you talk to, it's QB1 for people, it's QB2 for other people. I have him at QB3, but it's kind of 2A, 2B with him and Levis. But nonetheless, I mean, this is the guy I hear Carolina Panthers fans wanting. This or Levis. I mean, that's truly the outcome to me. If they stick and pick at 9, that feels the most likely. I could even see 4 quarterbacks coming off the board by pick 9, and this becomes Anthony Richardson. So no matter what, Carolina's looking for a franchise quarterback, and right now I think CJ Stroud's the best guy on the board, so let's go ahead and make that pick at 9. And let's get this rebuild fully going. And plus CJ Stroud, Frank Reich, yeah, that's a QB head coach pairing that I will love to watch, just like Levis and Steichen, at 4. Anyways, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. I would love to see this for the future of Myles Murphy. If there is an organization that is proven time and time again that they can develop pass rushers, Philadelphia is the first team that comes to mind. Them, Baltimore, Green Bay kind of immediately stick out. But man, I would just love to see this because Myles Murphy, I think, is going to come with, as a pass rusher, a year or two's worth of weight. I think because he is a high-end athlete and he's 6'5", 275, and that's essentially built out of a lab made to be an edge rusher type of build, that he'll be a pretty good edge rusher, and you'll see some of the flashes, kind of like Travon Walker last year. Again, those comps are going to be very live throughout this draft season, but he's a guy that hasn't put really any moves onto tape yet. So again, I think it's going to be a year or two before we start to see what could be there as a pass rusher. So why not go to a team that prioritizes defensive line? This is not out of the realm of possibilities here for Howie Roseman. A guy that can sit, or I say sit, play 400, 500 snaps as a rookie and just kind of learn his craft and learn from Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, all these guys that have been so good for so long in Philadelphia. I think it's the right landing spot for Myles Murphy to go. And I think it's a guy who, you talk about him as a top 10 pick, I am here for that value. I think that's about the right value for him, somewhere in the top 10 to 12. And I think, again, Philadelphia is the perfect spot for him to land, and I think it's an organization that would make this selection and kind of plan 2 to 3 years down the line with Murphy. So then we talk about the Houston Texans. I'm jumping the gun here. It's the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to go Broderick Jones. This and the guy I'm going to have in the third round for the Titans just feel like Titans players, considering the identity is Derrick Henry, right? They want to have maulers in the run game. So I'm looking at left tackle, and then we're going to go left guard in the day 3 portion of this video, if you're a Titans fan, just in case you're curious and want a reason to come back to the channel, right? But, Broderick Jones, I have as my OT4, so I have Peter Skoronski ahead of him, I have Anton Harrison ahead of him, but man, when you talk about a dude built to play left tackle and it's just a mean mover of people, like him and DeJuan Jones are the guys I always come back to. Is like, dude, there is something in the, I don't know what they did to become so strong, but I need to get all that workout regimen or something, man. So this feels like a ground and pound type of tackle, and then we'll figure out the pass protection side of it, because I do think he's raw there. And 1-year starter at Georgia, and a team that kind of just imposed its will on college football the last 2 years. You kind of see that rawness, but it never came back to roost. It never came back to hurt the Bulldogs. So, I think he's a little raw there. But for Tennessee, hey, ground and pound. That's your identity. Then we'll set up play action passing off of that. And we're going to go speed receiver in tomorrow's episode. So, we're going to kind of continue to build upon that. And then that wide receiver tomorrow is going to be the counter, obviously, after Derrick Henry. But again, Broderick Jones just feels like a mean, people moving, we're going to run the ball a lot, we're going to feed Derrick Henry 20-25 times a game type of addition to this team. So then we get to the Houston Texans. I do mean it this time when I say it. Let's go Lucas Van Ness. I think he's a really interesting player in this year's class, one of the younger guys of the edge group, inside-out versatility, kind of like we were talking about with Tyree Wilson. Really nice blend of explosiveness, strength. I mean, this guy, you want to talk about movers of people from the edge group, awesome edge rusher, and one of the best edge rushers in this class when it comes to winning with power. But again, the explosiveness off the line, you're talking about turning speed into power, and that's when it gets really dangerous, but also a lot of bend. So this is a guy who can win with a variety of moves, win in a variety of ways. And for Houston, it's like, who's that guy long term that's going to be the double-digit sack guy? I think you need to find that answer. So I've gone Quentin Johnson a ton here at 12, and maybe even Jordan Addison a handful of times. You could go offensive line. I'm kind of intrigued by that, but as much as I like O'Cyrus Torrance, I don't know if I like him as a top 12 pick in this year's class. So let's go Lucas Van Ness here for the Houston Texans. And yeah, they got a ton of picks in the future video. So if you're a Texans fan, I encourage you to come back to the channel. So then at 13, let's go Peter Skoronski. I think this is the kind of offensive lineman that the Jets are kind of looking for as they're in flux right now, depending on what they want to do with Mekhi Becton, George Fant, Dwayne Brown, all those tackles. I think, drafting a guy who can play tackle or guard is a good thing, because no matter what, Peter Skoronski is going to be one of your 5 best offensive linemen, and you'll find a way to put him on the field. So I've had this pick a handful of times. This and Paris Johnson Jr. I'm sorry, Jets fans, this is probably all you've seen over the last couple of weeks, so I do apologize, but I do think this is the best route for this team to go. And it's tough for the Jets because add an offensive lineman, add a linebacker and a safety like I'm going to do in the next 2 videos, and, then it's the quarterback. There's not a whole lot of holes in this roster, which is great to say for a team that's picking 13 overall, but it comes down to the quarterback position. So let's go ahead and maybe make an acquisition that whoever that new quarterback is will be very, very happy about with Peter Skoronski. Then we get to the New England Patriots at 14. This is when I'm going to have Quentin Johnston come off the board. I mean, this is just the wide receiver that this team doesn't have. Yeah, Tyquan Thornton's got speed. Yeah, Devontae Parker's got contested catch ability. This guy can do both. So this guy can run 4.3s, at minimum low 4.4s at 6'4", 215, 220 pounds. Great body control. Like I use this comp against John Ross all the time. Him and John Ross are both guys who have good size. Johnston's even bigger and can run really fast. But John Ross was not finding the football in the air, and he was not going to win in the air. And he's also a guy who has a really hard time going from 100 down to 0. Quentin Johnston has that ability to stop and then go up and get it in the air. And again, that's just a valuable add to this New England team. Furthermore, I make this joke all the time, but I mean it. Marcus Jones was their most dynamic wide receiver, if you want to call him that, with the ball in his hands. And he's their punt returner / nickel corner. So getting a guy who's a great satellite weapon like Quentin Johnston, I think it's a very valuable add. And I would love to see what this type of wide receiver, on top of the hiring of Bill O'Brien as the OC, what does this do for Mac Jones? Because I think if by hiring Bill O'Brien, if you draft Quentin Johnston at 14, or wide receiver of your choice if you're New England, now the excuses are gone. Last year I was putting a ton of blame on Matt Patricia, and I think that was kind of a lost year for Mac Jones. This upcoming year, none of that, because you got a legitimate OC, and now you'll have a number 1 wide receiver in the making in Quentin Johnston, in my opinion. So this would make for a really interesting season ahead if this were the pick for New England. So then we get to the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to go Nolan Smith here. He's an edge that I just feel is a uniquely Green Bay guy, him and Lucas Van Ness. But man, I would just love to see them be able to prioritize that edge depth. I like Kingsley and Agbury too, but I think by drafting Nolan Smith, you're opening up the door in a year's time to move on from Preston Smith, who to me, very up and down, and he makes a lot of money to be inconsistent. So I think this is kind of open up that door to free up some cap down the line. This is another place where if Brian Branch is available, I'd be really interested by that fit. But Nolan Smith, high-end athlete, highly touted recruit, and a really good run defender too. So he's a guy that, maybe the way you get him on the field and get him some NFL playing time is by getting him down or getting him on the field in early downs, right? And especially with Rashawn Gary coming back from injury, maybe he's a little slow to start. That could be a nice rotation where Nolan Smith gets the run game or, potential running down work, and then passing situations, you're working Rashawn Gary back to full speed. Or if Preston Smith disappoints or he's injured, you have a contingency in place with Nolan Smith. And corners, edge, wide receiver. I'm never going to tell you have enough. To me, you never have enough. So always try to prioritize those positions, and you never know what's going to happen. So I think adding Nolan Smith is a really nice contingency, but also a really nice long-term play for Green Bay. Then we get to the Washington Commanders, and I liked this pick from a recent reaction I have on the channel to PFF's Mike Renner's latest mock draft, so much so that I decided that, I'm going to go ahead and do that for my next one, because, man, this makes a ton of sense. I mean, Brian Brzee as this 6'5", 300-pound, I think he can add 15, 20 pounds, but the other thing, I say that all the time, and once you get to the NFL, that workout regimen is different. They are it literally becomes your job. It's not just something you're doing on top of school. This is becoming your job. So I really have no concerns about him being able to add some bulk and add some strength, specifically in his lower half. But if he does that, man, I mean, considering how good of an athlete he is and he adds that strength, I think you're getting a pretty competent run-stopping defensive tackle to be able to replace Daron Payne, who I just think Washington's not going to be able to, keep up with that market. So this makes sense from, replacing one run-stopping D tackle, who Payne's also had some pass rush wins. I'm not trying to limit him to one skill set, but you get a run stopper there, a D tackle to replace Daron Payne, who's going out the door, but also Brzee has a ton of upside as a pass rusher given his athletic ability and the fact that at Clemson he basically has no moves on tape. Him and Miles Murphy are basically starting from zero. So why not pair him up with one of the best interior defensive linemen, and specifically one of the best interior defensive linemen as a pass rusher in Jonathan Allen? That feels like the perfect person for Brian Brzee to learn from. That, or if he makes it all the way down to Kansas City, then that might be the absolute best place and the best mentor-mentee relationship he can have. So love this fit a ton. It makes sense for Washington and addressing their needs. And plus, people say this all the time, how you spend your time shows your priorities. How you spend your money showcases your priorities. And we're talking about a team that last year had 4 first-rounders across the defensive line. I think we know what Ron Rivera and Washington's priorities are, and I think Brian Brzee could totally continue that MO. Next up, Pittsburgh Steelers at 17. I'm going to go Christian Gonzalez. Man, I would just love this fit. No matter what Terrell Lawson wants to do as defensive coordinator, if he wants to run more man, wants to stick in more zone coverage, or change it from cover 3 to cover 2 heavy, whatever defense you put Christian Gonzalez in, I think he fits. I really do. The fact that he's 6'2" with long arms and runs in the 4-3, it's really easy to get a guy like that on the field, right? Like, just because there are not many corners like that. There's a lot in this class, but for the NFL's perspective, that's a rare commodity. And then throw in the fact that he has such a fluid mover. Like, when he breaks on a ball, it does not look like he's expending any extra effort, and he is just gliding in that direction. It is a thing to watch. Christian Gonzalez's highlights are some of the best to watch. Now, granted, you can't just watch the highlights because he's not a perfect prospect, but man, in a loaded corner class, it's hard not to consider Gonzalez as maybe the best, the second best, or at worst, like top 3 in this class. And again, I think the cornerback room is the best part of this upcoming draft. So Christian Gonzalez, a perfect addition to that Pittsburgh defense, and a team that, like, what is that plan long-term at corner? Like, Cam Sutton could be gone, and then who's there, right? Like Levi Wallace, Ahkello Witherspoon. Yeah, I think there's a lot of room to be had to grow there for Pittsburgh in the secondary. Now let's talk about the Detroit Lions. This is one pick I've had before, and this is just one where, yeah, maybe this is like a little bit of like a Madden move here. And, I try to keep this as obviously realistic as possible, mostly talking about what I think would make sense while also trying to play a little predictive what teams are thinking. But man, you're telling me Bijan Robinson can get behind one of the best offensive lines in football? It's the same argument I was making last week when I had Bijan going 10 to Philadelphia. It's like, yeah, Bijan behind that O-line? Yeah, I'm ready to see him put up some Pro Bowl numbers. Like, this dude's stat line is going to be redonkulous. And I think running back's a big part of the component, but ultimately comes down to your offensive line. Like, there's a reason, talking as a Steelers fan, Najee Harris hasn't been like this world saver that I think a lot of Steelers fans wanted him to be. And it's because the offensive line still sucks. I mean, simply put, it's just not a good unit. But Philadelphia and Detroit, to me, 1 and 2 maybe best offensive lines in the league. If not 1 and 2, they're 2 of the top 5. So you're telling me you could put the best pure running back in this draft class behind that O-line? Yeah, I'm absolutely here for that. Plus, I know Amon-Ra St. Brown does a ton from the slot, but he also played outside at USC. Maybe you could kick him out wide and move Bijan into the slot and get creative. This is also like where I want to see Bijan behind that offensive line. I want to see a creative offensive coordinator like Ben Johnson get his hands on a player like Bijan Robinson, because oh my God, I am absolutely ready to see what he draws up, because that is just going to be NFL fanfare. That's going to be must-watch type of tape study. So would love this type of addition. And it's your second first-round pick, so I feel like, yeah, obviously you're prioritizing value anywhere you go, but when you have a second first-rounder, drafting a guy who is one of the best pure players in this class but maybe plays a position of a lower position value, I think you can get away with that here at 18. So I like Bijan a ton there to the Lions. And then we get to Tampa Bay. Another week where I'm going to go Anthony Richardson. Again, I think he comes off the board before this just because upside talks. Traits talk when it comes to a quarterback. So I think he goes before this. But man, if you're Tampa Bay, I think this is as good a situation you could have. This is an interesting team because I feel like they're either going to go Derek Carr, run it back, keep all those veterans in place, and basically kind of forget that last year happened and say, hey, well, we fired Byron Leftwich, now everything's fixed. Or they're going to say, yeah, it doesn't really make sense for us to keep all these veterans. We'll keep the guys we signed last year like Carlton Davis and Chris Godwin on his extension. But Mike Evans, you're gone. Vita Vea, maybe you're gone. David will let you walk. Devin White, maybe too. Move on from some of those vets that you didn't just bring back and just re-sign. And then, depending on Kyle Trask or in this situation, Anthony Richardson falls in your lap at 19. You go with one of those young quarterbacks, both coming from Florida too, not purposeful whatsoever. But nonetheless, you roll with one of those guys, if not both of those guys in some combination if this were to play out, and just see where your season goes. And if you suck, then congratulations, you're in the Caleb Williams, Drake May sweepstakes. Or if they're good, then congratulations, you got your franchise quarterback of the future. So I tend to think that they're going to go in the latter there versus the former with like a Derek Carr. But nonetheless, I do think that is still on the table. So I like Anthony Richardson here at 19. I think this is a team where if they didn't have to move up to get him, they'd pull the trigger. So let's go ahead and move on into the 20s now. The Seattle Seahawks. And I do want to make a quick caveat as I make the O'Cyrus Torrance pick. I'm going to go off interior offensive line once more in the third round, which granted, in the third round, I think it's more likely they'll do it in the fourth. If I'm 100% honest, but I could see them going interior offensive line in the first and the third. I mean, this is a team with a lot of holes, and that's a big part of their identity, and they want to make the life of Kenneth Walker that much easier, and it feels very Pete Carroll and John Snyder. The other note is I've been going corner pretty often here at 20, and I considered in the second round, but ultimately I was right on the Taylor Lewan, soon to be cut casualty, and there's a couple other names that make a ton of sense. I'm kind of thinking about one for the Bengals next week, a little spoiler alert, and maybe a running back falling all the way down there because makes sense as a cut candidate. But I think another one that makes a ton of sense, and I've been talking about for months now, is Shaq Griffin. So I really can't see a world where he isn't cut by the Jags, considering they're over the cap, and he has just not been good in Jacksonville. So I think Shaq Griffin gets cut, and Seattle's going to be the first team calling him. And they're going to be like, hey, come back and be our number 2 corner, work with Tariq Woolen. And once they do that, I can't see this team prioritizing corner anywhere before day 3, honestly. So I am making this pick with the thought in mind that Shaq Griffin is going to go back to Seattle and be that other outside corner, just in case you were wondering and wanting to see a cornerback here. So I am going to go with Cyrus Torrence because, yeah, they can get better on the interior, and this just feels, again, Pete Carroll, John Snyder like. So get the best guard and get the first pick of it, right? Like, you get to control the interior offensive line class, if you will, here at 20. Next up, the Chargers. Any order of these next 2 picks, I will not complain. I'm going to go Zay Flowers to the Chargers this time around, and then Jordan Addison to the Ravens, but flip it. I don't care. This is just like at picks 2 and 3, Carter and Anderson. I don't care. Either way, these teams need an upgrade there on the outside. I decided to go with Flowers just because I'd love to see that satellite weapon and a Kellen Moore offense where he has utilized a lot of those satellite underneath, get the ball in space type of plays. But I, at the same time, would really like to see him open it up and push the ball down the field, especially with a quarterback with an arm like Justin Herbert's, right? And I think Zay Flowers has an abundance of downfield speed and route running prowess, to get open deep down the field. So I think this is a guy that is exactly what the Chargers are looking for. Now, I say this all the time. I am hoping this is a selection not to replace Keenan Allen, but to be in addition to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams already being there. Because then when Flowers is your third guy and he's filling in as, I do what those other 2 don't, that's when this offense gets really scary. So really like the addition there. And then for Baltimore, whether it's Flowers or Addison, I think both those guys can get open deep down the field. I think Flowers is going to potentially run a little faster, but probably not by much. But Addison, it's like, hey, crisp route runner, can get open in the intermediate and deep parts of the field. Pair him up with Rashad Bateman. You got 2 guys who can get open. Plus, you already have Mark Andrews, one of the best tight ends in football. A change in the offensive coordinator position. Maybe they can land Eric Bieniemy. He's also got interviews with Washington. I'm very fascinated about how that plays out. But change in OC, adding another wide receiver in the room, just like what we talked about a little bit earlier on about Mac Jones and the Patriots. That takes away some of the passing game excuse for Lamar. Now, granted, Lamar is about to get a bag no matter what. So you're making this, kind of a non-excuse after you already pay him the money versus the Patriots are trying to get rid of excuses to decide if they want to give Mac Jones the money. So it's a little different from that standpoint. But nonetheless, you're trying to maximize the talent of a quarterback who's won an MVP. Let's go ahead and put Jordan Addison in the mix there. Him or Zay Flowers. I'd love that pick either way. Let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings now. I'm going to have them take Drew Sanders. I want to talk about Brian Flores. I mean, in a span of like 24 hours, it was announced that Jero Evero was going to Carolina. I was like, wow, what a fantastic defensive coordinator hire. I can't believe that. That's awesome. And then again, within the next day or 24 hours or so, I hear that the Vikings are going from Ed Donatel, who, with all due respect, I'm not a defensive coordinator. What do I know? But one of the worst defensive coordinators in the league last year, Ed Donatel, and you kind of saw that in the wild card round. And you go to Brian Flores, a guy who won double-digit games as a head coach, and before that was a great defensive mind. I mean, that's about as big a leap you can make at the defensive coordinator spot in general. So, but off of that, Flores is a guy who would blitz Jerome Baker a lot. He comes from that New England background, and they would use, Donta Hightower as a blitzer. So I think Drew Sanders is a guy who primarily at Alabama was lined up as an edge rusher. You saw some of that after he transferred to Arkansas, but we also got to see him over the middle of the field, and it was mostly him showcasing athleticism, because I still think he's a work in progress in regards to coverage and run defense. But nonetheless, you're getting an awesome athlete. You're getting faster in the middle of the field. If you're a Vikings fan, how many times have you heard me say that? And then on top of that, you're getting a guy who is an awesome pass rusher from the middle linebacker spot. So feels like a really nice fit there for Brian Flores, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if this is the pick. You could go corner here. I'm still very bullish on Andrew Booth Jr. and Cam Dantzler, but that being said, if you're worried as a Vikings fan, I am going to go corner in the day 3 video this Sunday. Now let's move on to the Jags. And hey, I couldn't get you Brian Branch this week, but I'm going to get you the next best thing. I'm going to give you Antonio Johnson, a very similar nickel corner, strong safety hybrid. I think Brian Branch could truly play free safety. I'll have to see what the 40 is for Antonio Johnson, but I'm not so optimistic. But that said, he's also 6'3", 200 pounds, so he's a bigger guy than Brian Branch. So give and take there. But nonetheless, again, Darius Williams, after moving outside, and the same thing happened when he was with the Rams. for whatever reason, is a smaller corner, moved outside and he got better. So, hey, take it however you get it. Now let's find that guy who can play on the inside, Antonio Johnson. I also think he could be a strong safety replacement long-term for Rayshon Jenkins. So I think no matter what you're looking for, Antonio Johnson can be a guy that quickly gets on the field and makes an impact if you are a Jags fan. So really love this fit. I love Brian Branch there, but if you can't get Branch, Antonio Johnson, I think makes a ton of sense. And it's probably a pick that, sorry, Jags fans, you're going to see a fair amount of moving forward. Now let's talk about the Giants at 25. It's been a while since I've gone wide receiver for the Giants. I thought about Jackson Smith-Njigba, so let me go ahead and actually talk about that before we get started, and I have to field questions in the comments, which go ahead and ask if you're curious about it. But I think Wan'Dale Robinson is slot only, and I think Jackson Smith-Njigba slot only. So the reason I'm not going JSN here is it's overlap. To me, you're just doing the same thing you already got last year. So I'm going to go with a big-time riser from the Senior Bowl, Tank Dell. A guy I think can play on the inside and the out, and on the outside. Sorry, that was worded weird. But 5'10", 165 pounds. I get the trepidation. He's a smaller guy, but a 6-foot wingspan. So I legitimately think he can fight off press coverage at the line. And this is a guy where, take that gamble. I dare you. If he gets past you, the play's over, and it's 6 in this case for the Giants. So I think this is kind of that replacement for Sterling Shepard. We've had years upon years about trade rumors around him. This is an opportunity for them to get a fresh start there with Brian Dable and Joe Shane there as the GM. So this is kind of their opportunity to get that type of guy. And again, can play inside and out. So just in case maybe, Wan'Dale Robinson does convert to an outside wide receiver. Again, I think he's slot only. So Tank Dell gives you that abundance of speed. I think this team's looking for a big play guy to open up the offense. And if they bring back Saquon Barkley, having that over-the-top weapon, having a great running back and a good run game opens up opportunities for Tank Dell. And then Tank Dell with the ability to take the defense over the top and force safeties to play a little bit further back makes it that much easier for Saquon Barkley and those other underneath options. So kind of just a symbiotic relationship, if you will, by adding Tank Dell. And, I went with him at 26 last week to Dallas. 25-26 is about the ceiling for Tank Dell, as much as I do like him. He's almost like Sky Moore last year, where it's like, you get in the 20s and I can start thinking about it. Earlier than that, it's like, I don't know if he's big enough. I don't know if I like him that much, but I really was impressed by Tank Dell going back and checking out the film, and then you see him at the Senior Bowl and nobody can touch him. So I still stand by the pick here at 25. Dallas up at 26. It's been a little bit since I've gone off-ball linebacker, but let's go Trenton Simpson, right? A couple of big contracts, Leighton Vander Esch, and I would love to see a world where they bring back Vander Esch and have Trenton Simpson, right? Nickel defense, you got 2 linebackers on the field, but basically this is a move solidifying that Micah Parsons is your edge of the future, opposite of Tank Lawrence, and then some of those other guys they brought in over the years, so including Dorrance Armstrong. I think he's a free agent this year, though. If you're a Cowboys fan, let me know about that. But I think this is just solidifying Micah Parsons as an edge rusher, and Trenton Simpson is my number 1 off-ball linebacker, even though I had Sanders come off the board. I think Sanders is just a better fit for what Flores wants to do. I think Simpson gives you the coverage abilities, sideline to sideline speed capabilities that I think Dallas is looking to covet. And, him paired up with Leighton Vander Esch, you got 2 insanely gifted athletic linebackers. Now, you just need them to stay healthy and be able to stick on the field. And also, I think Trenton Simpson, depending on the personnel, could also maybe do a little bit of work in the slot. Now, of course, it depends on the matchup, right? If you got a guy who runs 4.2s in the slot, that's going to get picked on. But I could even see him kind of transition to something like that, kind of like what we've seen from Isaiah Simmons, another former Clemson linebacker. So I could even see that being a way that Dan Quinn try to utilize Trenton Simpson's skill set. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills, and this is about as early as I've ever had Steve Avila go. Actually, I know it's the highest I've ever had Steve Avila go, but I like this fit, right? A team that wants to pass the ball, passes the ball as much as any other team in the NFL. Go ahead and get the interior offensive lineman who might be the best interior offensive line pass blocker in this class. So I think it makes a lot of sense there. It's an upgrade of Roger Saffold, where I've gone, or Cyrus Torrance last couple of mocks, or in previous mocks in general. That makes sense as a replacement for Saffold, getting that power left guard in the mix, try to run the ball better. But Avila kind of fits better when it comes to the fact that, hey, we know Josh Allen's going to sling it around the yard, and that's their primary focus. Was with Dable, and it is the same way with Ken Dorsey. So I like this fit a ton, and this is about the highest I'd see Avila go. But nonetheless, I think the fit makes a ton of sense, and I think late round 1, especially after a good Senior Bowl, is not out of the cards. Now let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals at 20. I'm going to go Darnell Wright here. He's kind of leapfrogging a couple of tackles that I have ranked higher, but this is your kind of Lyle Collins insurance / swing tackle capabilities, because Darnell Wright did play left tackle for a couple of years at Tennessee. He was much better once he flipped over to the right side, but that also coincides with Josh Heupel showing up in that offense. I think keeps tackles a little clean. So that's again why I'm a little hesitant on Wright versus, an Anton Harrison or even a Broderick Jones, who I have as my OT4. Wright's there at OT5. But nonetheless, again, this is your Lyle Collins insurance contingency plan. And then depending on how this plays out this year, I could totally see Lyle Collins being a cut casualty in another offseason in a year's time. But yeah, just in case things go wrong, you're a Super Bowl contender. This is a team that is not like, okay, well, that's a problem you need to fix next offseason. This is a team looking to win Super Bowls. So if it ain't working now, you need an answer now. So I think Darnell Wright is exactly that for Cincinnati. Now let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. Let's go Michael Mayer. This is one that, I could totally see him falling all the way down to 29. And when was the last dominant Saints tight end we saw? Jimmy Graham, right? Like Adam Troutman. I did like Adam Troutman a ton coming out of college, but that unfortunately has just not worked out. So let's go ahead and draft a Michael Mayer, best tight end in the class. Not the most insane athlete, but hey, if Michael Thomas stays healthy, him, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed is your wide receivers 1 through 3, and then add on Michael Mayer. I don't know who the quarterback's going to be, but damn, that plus Alvin Kamara, that's a pretty solid supporting cast. So whoever that quarterback is, they got a pretty decent ecosystem to be stepping into. So I'm really interested by the fit of Michael Mayer to the New Orleans Saints. So if you're a Saints fan, let me know what you think, because I know it can be kind of all over the board. You want D-line, you want wide receiver, do you want quarterback here at 29? But let me know, Michael Mayer, is that a fit that you would dig? So 2 more picks to go. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, the team that obviously lost the Super Bowl, and what a value. How about Joey Porter Jr. falling all the way to 30? I've said time and time again, he's one of my favorite corners in this draft class, and I've also said plenty of times in this video alone, corners the strength of this draft class, but the way I've had the board fall out here, there's going to be some corners falling into tomorrow's video. So if you're interested in that, of course, like I've been saying, come back for tomorrow's vid. But Joey Porter Jr., I know they lost Jonathan Gannon, which, that's crazy, right? Because he was saying after, the NFC Championship game, I'm going to be back. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be with the Eagles next year. He ends up taking the Cardinals job. Good on him. Hey, that's it's a pay upgrade. It's a cool opportunity, and I hope he does the best with it. Now I'm interested to see who that next DC is going to be. But nonetheless, I assume it's going to be someone who does a lot of the same stuff as Jonathan Gannon. A lot of cover 4, a lot of soft zone, and then let your pass rush. Rush with 4, drop 7 into coverage, and keep the ball in front of you basically in coverage. So I think it's going to be a lot of the same stuff, and if that is the case, Joey Porter Jr. makes a ton of sense as a James Bradberry contingency because, hey, I know a lot of Eagles fans are anticipating him coming back, but he's a free agent. We don't know that yet. And if he signs an extension, then I'll stop making us pick. But nonetheless, this is a ideal replacement. May not be as gifted of an athlete as a Christian Gonzalez or maybe even a Devon Witherspoon, who I have going ahead of him. Nonetheless, 6'2", long arms, and a guy who just got better year over year at Penn State. So I'm really excited. And plus the value here at 30, I've had this guy go as high as 10 to Philadelphia. So getting him here at 30 is some supreme value. Now the Kansas City Chiefs at 31. I think this would be a really fun pairing. I was talking about earlier, Brian Brzee, man, if I can get him to Kansas City and let him learn from Chris Jones, that'd be fun. How about Kalijah Kancey? This would be a fun fit too. This would just be adding a guy who doesn't play the run that well. 6'1", 280 pounds. He's a pass rush specialist. But pairing him up with Chris Jones, letting him be the mentee to Chris Jones as the mentor, wow. As a team that's going to continue to play ahead and obviously just won another Super Bowl, they're going to be a good team again next year, spoiler alert. Adding pass rushes, always a good thing. So a lot of times I've been doing it with edge, but this time I want to play it around and say, hey, could we get Chris Jones a running mate on the inside? And maybe this even frees up. I think Chris Jones is more effective from the inside, but at the same time, we saw in the AFC Championship game, he can go mano-a-mano with the tackle when you need him. And when you're looking for that big play, and that's exactly what he did against the Bengals in the AFC Championship game. So adding a Kalijah Kancey, why don't you do that even more? So, man, I just think this would create an insane duo there on the inside. And quarterbacks hate pressure from up the middle. Chris Jones and Kalijah Kancey, good luck. There's going to be a lot of pressure in your face if you're a quarterback. But everybody, that is going to do it for the first round portion of my updated 2023 NFL mock draft. I'm going to scroll across the top so you can see all the picks one more time. But let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who's your favorite team? And what do you think of the pick that I gave your squad? Whether you liked it, hated it, or somewhere there in between, I'd love to know what your thoughts were and, why you feel that way. And hopefully, if you guys are new, and hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, do all that fun stuff for me. It'd really help me and the channel out a ton. Again, these mock drafts have been a ton of fun over the last month plus with you all. So, that is going to do it for the first round portion of today's video. Be sure to come back tomorrow for round 2. But until then, my name is Teach, and I'm signing off.